Every group has a leader, and that leader has to be above anything. And one thing my kids could count on was consistency. They won some games they shouldn't have, and that was always a great thing. They inspired me by their work ethic. I never had a kid that didn't work his tail off, and they were fabulous kids that way.
I think when you describe a great educator and a great coach, you'll find that the greats probably cross over in both categories. Great educators are great coaches, and great coaches are great educators. And I think my dad was both. He was a great coach because he never stopped being a good teacher of the basics. And I think a lot of teachers forget that. They will teach their subject, but they forget the student. They forget the player. And Dad never forgot that.
If you know anything about Mexican culture, once you're the baby, you're always the baby. So I was the last one at home, and I was feeling my oats, and my father introduced me to some people and said, "This is our baby." I was 15 years old, and so I made the mistake of saying he saved the best for the last, and he knocked me on my wallet. And as he helped me up, he told me that nobody was the best in our family, that we were all the same. So I was born here in Greeley, Colorado. My parents came from Chihuahua, Mexico in 1910. The family was moved to Colorado to become part of the labor force to do the sugar beets, and Great Western Sugar Company would move families that had just come from Mexico into New Mexico and move them in to become part of the labor force. And so that's what we were brought in for, was to work the fields. My father insisted and demanded on tremendous work ethic and got it from all of us. Traditionally in our family, you dropped out of school in the 8th grade to join the workforce to help support the family. And my brothers and sisters made a concerted effort with my dad that I was not to drop out of school.
When my father was very young, being a Hispanic, obviously, being a Mexican at that time was very difficult because they were required to speak only in English. They were often told that after their 8th grade year, when they graduated, they would move on to careers in waste management or mechanics. He had a lot of hoops and hurdles and stereotypes to beat, but he never allowed us the opportunity to use those as a crutch. He said, yes, you're Mexican, but you're no different than the next guy.
Every May we would leave town to go do the crops in California. We'd come back in October and we were always behind in the classroom, and the teachers were wonderful. They got us caught up. There's no doubt about it that baseball was what kept our community sane.
Growing up the oldest, I think I probably watched him grow up a little bit too. So I got to see him play in a national championship. I got to watch him begin his career. I think my earliest memories of him were watching him play. I really didn't understand the game. I thought he was kind of mean because he didn't let very many guys hit the ball. And I remember crying and telling the manager's wife that Daddy wasn't very nice because he didn't let anybody hit the ball. And she said he wasn't supposed to, that that's the pitcher's job. And she explained that he was good at what he did.
He could shoot, he could throw a baseball, he was athletic, but he had a drive that over-trumped everything.
I know that he was a tough ass. He was a pretty tough pitcher. Wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the fastest guy or the strongest guy, but probably worked the hardest. And I know he was pretty successful as a pitcher, and he was very, very confident and cocky at the right times.
knowing at a young age that whatever it was that my dad was doing, that people around him were really impressed by him, that they followed him, and that they looked up to him. And I did too.
My dad didn't believe in playing ball. He thought you should always work. To keep me home, he built me a basket. I came home one night and there was a basket of 11 feet high. I'd come home and shoot on that thing, and probably the best thing that ever happened for me because it was too high. And so I'd shoot free throws, and my mom would rebound. Played 2 years of baseball and 3 of basketball. Played for the legendary John Bunn in basketball. He was the editor of the rules. But what happened was I ended up leading the country in free throw percentage for much of my senior year, and ended up 7th in the country. And really, that I can still shoot free throws with my eyes closed. But when you give kids the opportunity to do something that they're good at, there's a chance they can become contributors to that community. Arguably, I was the top athlete coming out of the colleges in Colorado. Couldn't get a job. My interviews lasted about 20 seconds because I was very confident and I wanted to be a head coach. And every guy had a nice assistant's coach job, but so I went to work for J.C. Penney's and led the league in suit sales. And then in February that 62, this little guy walked in and looking for Frank Carbajal. And I thought I was a bill collector, so I said, well, let me see if I can find him. and he says, I have a job for him. And I said, is it a head job? He says, it will be in the fall. Right now, he just got to start a PE program for the elementary schools, right up my alley. I said, I'll be right back. I went in, signed my timesheet, put my parents' address down, went home, loaded up my family, and followed him to Moab, Utah. It was a dream. Yeah. And I thought I was a good coach. We had good players. See, when I started coaching, the kids would walk in the gym and ask me, which wall are we going through today, Coach?
In walks Coach Carbajal, and it was pretty amazing from the first day of practice, just the way he walked in and kind of took over the situation. I mean, he was probably only about 30 years old. He just started with his philosophy, and from day one I could just tell he was a guy that demanded respect and earned respect, and we just loved playing for him.
You know, he started off, it was a little bit rough the first time around, but then we went undefeated the junior year. We only lost 3 games the senior year. At one point we won 55 out of 56 games, and we were pretty confident. You know, it was like a machine. We were a run and gun team, pressing, arrogant, cocky, to throw teams under the bus and step on them.
Some of the things that he did, just watching him in the stands was intriguing because he was unorthodox in a lot of ways, but it was successful for his group. So it's like, how is he taking, you know, a 5'9" guy and putting him in the middle of the zone, and the guy gets 25 points against one of the best teams in the state?
He coaches kind of the same way. He, you know, does a lot of things, and it's no nonsense. You know, straight to the point. He expects a lot out of people, but he gives a lot. You know, old school.
The things that you know about Frank Carbajal as a coach, being tough to play for and being so demanding that it would actually drive people away.
Whose team are you on, James? It was probably a love-hate relationship.
For 2 years, I couldn't stand the man.
You think practice is over, we'd be beating each other up for, you know, for 3 hours, and then he'd say just casually, okay, get your 5 miles in.
From the stories I heard, I don't know. I would have loved to learn all the knowledge, but I don't know if I would want to run miles on the beach while he drove by with his Coke.
Show some guts!
And refs don't really like him.
Thank you, Kevin! Thanks, Kev!
Right before I met him, we were watching camp, and he was doing his free throw clinic, which was pretty famous because he would talk through the whole 15-minute presentation and shoot the whole time and never miss a free throw. And so I'm watching this and pretty impressed with the clinic itself. And some kid was talking. Some kid who paid good money to go to camp was talking during his presentation. So from about 15 feet away, he fired the basketball and hit the kid right in the face.
Explain to me why you would do that.
If you weren't there 15 minutes early, he'd leave you. I know one time after a game in Kenyatta, we were hanging out in the lobby with our families instead of by the bus where we should have been. And Kenyatta's an hour and a half from Salinas, but we only had 7 guys that year. and he left us. He left 3 of us.
Bagley! I saw that a mile away!
You know, the other thing was that he took those guys to a nice steakhouse while he left us. So.
He was always speaking in parables, if you will, analogies for everything.
Coach Carbisms.
Like a fly with the crows, get shot with the crows.
Do your job.
No sniveling.
Get in your stance.
Carb time.
Bowman Stevenson, stop the ball! Take the charge!
Be prepared and perhaps my chance will come.
I think I'm going to have to time you with a calendar.
You're killing us, son.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda on his excuse list are all related to IFA, and IFA is the mother of all failure.
You're amazing, Stevenson!
I can't think of very many Carbisms growing up right now because all of them contain bad language, and I don't want to curse on this documentary.
He asked Levi, do you know why Jesus was successful? And Levi's, no, you know, he's probably thinking he's the son of God, but Coach said, because Jesus was in his stance. And he talked about Jesus, he went on like a 5-minute rant, it felt like, talking about Jesus being in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and how the devil couldn't tempt him because he was in his stance. So get in your stance, Levi, just like Jesus.
Anybody that played for him would tell you that he was extremely demanding, very tough. There were times where we wanted to probably strangle him because he was so demanding and so tough, but it was for a reason.
Being a junior college coach, you're the mom, you're the dad, you know, you're the coach, you're the brother. You got to make sure the kids are, you know, the kids that are out of area are housed and fed, and you got to check on them academically. And so, I mean, you're really a jack of all trades, and we had always talked about if you could coach at the junior college level, you can coach anywhere because you got to do everything.
Well, the game of basketball has served for many of us to learn how to perform in the biggest stage. And when I speak about the biggest stage, it's not a basketball, it's not a bigger basketball court, but it's how we're going to perform in our lives, the rest of our lives.
His philosophy had nothing to do back then about winning. His philosophy had to do about life, and he would teach us the intrinsic values of trust and honesty and integrity, those kind of things that you just can't do without. Humility was a big thing with him. It was all about the team, and it was all about hard work. It had nothing to do with winning. He said that would take care of itself.
Just to always work hard, always just do the right thing, and do your best at everything, treat people with respect, and you know, that's what you should do. Like, you shouldn't expect to get rewarded for doing the right thing, being a good person. That's what, as a Carbajal, that's who you should be.
Seeing these players that are coming from his first high school basketball team that are coming here and the love that they have for Coach, and then hearing those stories. And we all share these similar stories about how Coach inspired us to, you know, play at another level. He saw something in us that we didn't see. And but we all share that. And that's a lot of fun because hey, they learned the same lesson that I learned, and Coach hasn't changed. Those lessons are valuable. They're foundational, you know, and so, you know, you get to build off of those something beautiful.
When you look at the breadth and the length of Coach's career, and that the first team that he coached, his guys show up strong at El Camino in Sacramento. And then even 10 years later, my group of the Santa Barbara connection, and then you jump another 10 years. It's a 30-year career of you know, taking kids and you know, teaching and molding them. And you're right, the common link is Coach Carbajal, and that is maybe the greatest thing a person can do is connect people.
Strong family values, being a teammate. Being honest. These are all things that Coach Carbajal used on a basketball court to teach us how to become better men.
Other than my own father, he was the most influential man in my life. It's hard to say that about anybody.
Tell me about choices in your life.
Part of me wonders if he could be starting out his career today, if things would end up differently.
Well, I remember he would go to like continuation schools, that kind of thing, and talk to some pretty tough kids. And a lot of times it would be the Latino kids. And he would ask them, how many Mexican Americans do you think are head coaches in Division I basketball? And they'd throw out all their numbers and they'd always finish up with 0. But certainly Frank should have been a Division I head coach, you know, if not an NBA head coach. It just should have happened. And sometimes it was for other reasons, but that was the reason at least a few times. And we think we made a lot of progress, but that stat still stands out. I mean, it's 2013 now. And there might be 1 or 2, but I'm not sure there is. And if there is, it's 1 or 2.
And I think it's just a real missed opportunity that the institution didn't grant him that chance. I think there's a lot of young men out there who missed out on a great opportunity to be influenced by this man.
Coach Carvajal in a Division I program would have been I think would have been right next to the greatest of all time.
What he's accomplished without being a Division I coach stands by itself. It doesn't, you know, that doesn't need to be on your resume, coach. What you've done for all the players that you've worked with, that's your legacy.
You know you can count on this guy. You can go to war with this guy. You can take on any obstacle and win because you've been given the tools through the coaches programs.
Dad, you may not have gotten all the things that you dreamed of. You may not have gotten your dream job. You may not have made millions of dollars, but I will tell you this, that you were the dream job for many, because many had an opportunity to be a part of your life and you had an opportunity to impact them. So you were a dream to many, Father, and you still are. And you may not have made $1 million, but I know that you have athletes and players that have, and they've done so as a result of what you've taught them, as a result of what you did for them. We don't store our treasures up here on earth, Dad. That's what God tells us. Your treasure's supposed to be in heaven.
I would want people, especially my dad's players, to know that there's a lot he's proud of with the accomplishments they've made in the wins and the victories and their accomplishments as athletes. But I think what he's most proud of is that they grew up to be such good people. And he knows that most of that goes to the contribution of their own parents. But the fact that they continue to credit him and the influence he had in their lives, I think that means more to him than even all the other accolades, just that he helped them to be better people. So again, that goes back to him thinking he fell short of his goal. I don't think so. I think he did just fine.
When I was 40 years old was the last time I saw my dad. And it was the only time that my dad has ever showed any emotion. And I was to lose him the following January. But he loved for me to rub his hands. He had big old knuckles, you know, from working in the fields. And I'd rub them with alcohol. I always did that since I was a little kid. And, this one day, I'm 40 years old, and he grabs my hand and he says, "You're a good boy."
Really touching.
He says, "You're going to be blessed through your children." Well, in the Catholic religion, you know, I was born and raised Catholic. That's like throwing cold water on you, you know. And he was right.
My dad was the youngest of 11 kids, so I think in a lot of ways we were his first real family too.
From my earliest memories, I remember shooting a basketball, or even the smallest of basketballs outside my backyard, and my dad would come home every day and ask me how many baskets or how many shots I took, and I'd always tell him 4, because that was the only number I knew back then. And
he taught us archery and tennis and track and badminton, swimming, and he made everything fun.
I think I was a freshman in high school when I finally beat my grandpa in one-on-one in basketball. There's blood all over both of our shirts, but I was pretty happy that I finally beat him.
I like scoring touchdowns and hitting home runs and scoring points, but my grandpa always taught me that defense is important, so I'm still working on that. He's been around me for as long as I can remember. He's gone to all my Little League games, all my basketball games, all my football games, you know, no matter what it was, no matter where it was, no matter where he was, he made it to everything.
Even this past year when I played at the University of Laverne, he would be watching my games online because he couldn't get all the way down there, it was too far. But he would be watching all my games and he would call me after the games and like usually tell me what I needed to work on, but that's okay.
It was never about gifts, it was never about money, it was always about the stories and the good food and being together. Dinner time, we always had to share stories about the best thing that happened to us that day or during the week. He knew how to make us laugh. He knew how to help us celebrate not just our own little wins during the day, but each other's. And he just always was and still is so good at making you feel like he was your biggest fan.
I think the most important thing was to develop players to the best of their ability and to play together. I don't ever remember it being important whether we won or lost. I don't have any regrets after a ball game. You'd come in and you left it out on the floor, win, lose, or draw.